2 Dean's Town Halls that are regularly scheduled through the year. For those of you who are new to the faculty, the third years will be familiar with this. One of the requests that was made when I first arrived was actually more communication from the Dean about what's going on in the faculty, and ideally a couple of town halls to talk about issues of importance, and so I agreed to that. And I think it's a really good idea, not to say that there aren't a whole lot of other opportunities by email or otherwise, but to get everybody together in a town hall once now, and then we'll do another one at the end of January. Other special ones can be scheduled in between, but wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity once September had sort of almost settled in entirely to get a chance to give you a bit of an update on what's going on, about a few things that are planned ahead for the faculty this year, and to be able to answer some questions, open forum that you might not otherwise have a chance to ask or be comfortable asking. I do note that we actually are recording this session, and so in that respect, at least the comments will be mic'd. We'll webcast it or post it on the website for those who aren't able to attend. I've made a practice of doing that so that you can review it afterwards as well. Really 3 things that I want to do today before going to Q&A. First off is actually really happy occasion, and that's to recognize Tim Young. I'll come back to that in just a moment. Wonderful celebrations for the faculty on all sorts of fronts, but this one in particular is really special. And so I'll come back and say a few embarrassing things about Tim in just a moment. Second is I want to update you a little bit on what's happening with both the institutional strategic plan from the university and the strategic planning process for the Faculty of Law. Give you a bit of an update as to what's happening with the open forum on October 1st and also a student consultation process that John Webster and Alison Numero are leading, where that all fits and where we're trying to move things going forward. And then the third is to talk about a couple of issues that the LSA executive have raised with me, some areas of concern, and a few updates in terms of faculty practices and policies that, again, third years will be a little more familiar with by some of the background, but for those of you who are in 2L and 1L, a bit of background for you, and then we can go to Q&A. So recognizing that people have to leave, we will certainly close off at 5 to 1, wherever we are. If you need to head off before then, no worries. Again, as I said, it'll be on the webcast and also available afterwards for one-on-one conversations if you like. Okay, so the first really happy occasion. We're always glad to have Tim here for tech support, but this is also for a really important and special occasion. We put forward a nomination as a faculty for the University of Alberta's 2016 Information Technology Client Service Awards. IT across the university has annual awards in a number of different categories, sort of lifetime contributions, but IT ambassadors, but in terms of the recognition of the contributions that Tim has made to this faculty, staff, students, administrators, and others, offered wonderful support for the nomination that we spearheaded for Tim. And Tim was recognized at the IT annual meeting in August, but I thought it was really important that we celebrate him here at the faculty with the people that he's dealing with day to day, who have so marvelously recognized and help us recognize the contributions that he's made. The IT Client Service Award recognizes individuals who have provided a high quality of service to a faculty, unit, or department. And in my nomination letter, I noted that Tim, quote, combines an amazing battery of technical knowledge and expertise with an outstanding level of service and something even more profound, a calming presence. I said as well that I didn't know that you could use lawyers and calm in the same sentence. With Tim, he makes that possible. The quotations in the appendix to the nomination letter, the Vice Dean reached out to many to get some illustrations and very direct illustrations, and let me take the liberty of quoting some of them. Tim stands out amongst the university staff I've worked with for his dedication, enthusiasm, and professionalism. He fulfills his responsibilities in an expert and timely manner, but he also often goes above and beyond that. On a couple of occasions, Tim has literally run to my assistance, even on matters that are not technically his responsibility. Tim's outstanding contributions ensure that even in a faculty with stretched resources, things are able to still run smoothly. As far as I can tell, he is irreplaceable. From a student. At Law Show this year, Tim was hanging out with us band geeks up in the balcony, and he came up to me and started asking me about my flute and asked if I could play a few notes for him. He proceeded to tell me it sounded beautiful and that he'd like to learn how to play the flute, etc. It was just super nice and genuine, which is memorable because as a flute player, it's rare for someone to show genuine interest without an American Pie band camp joke being involved. Tim is the best. Another one. Tim saved me in my first ever law exam. My computer decided to do an automatic update halfway through my exam and went on to take over an hour updating. Tim spent a half hour working with me at the end of the exam to transpose my written piece into my online exam and make sure everything was the way I intended it to be. He turned my terrified, quote, I'm going to fail this exam, end quote, experience into no big deal. And they go on and on and on. From faculty, from staff, from students. Tim is not only a wonderful technical resource for this faculty, but is living demonstration of the kind of community and collegiality that we want to foster and encourage. And so we were absolutely delighted, and a number of us were able to attend at the end of August the IT unit award recognition ceremony, but I wanted to make sure that we had the chance as a faculty and as a faculty community to recognize Tim today. Tim, would you come on up? Tim Young. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Tim. And thank you for your continuing contributions. There are some wonderful, wonderful stories about Tim stair running, his contributions otherwise, fundraising, doing a bike ride and apparently beating most other people by hours in the rain. Nothing really much surprises us anymore in terms of what you're able to accomplish, and we thank you for your continuing contribution to a faculty that really does value and appreciate so much what you do. Thanks again, Tim. You know, it's been a wonderful, wonderful, and really, really quick fall of recognitions on all sorts of different fronts. And, you know, on the faculty website, we're able to note a number of the faculty's achievements, but I just want to go through a few that I've had the pleasure of attending this fall. Yesterday afternoon, we actually had the Teaching Excellence Awards. Professor Tamara Buchwald, I think I saw here, was recognized with the Tevi H. Miller Teaching Excellence Award, nominated by group of students and others last year. Wonderful to have that recognition. Tamara was here. Congratulations again, as well as the Sessional Teaching Awards. I was able to attend last week the Confederation of Alberta Faculty Associations Awards, and Professor Tim Caulfield was recognized as one of their Distinguished Academic Award recipients. Last year we'd nominated Professor Ogbogu for their Early Career Award recognition. We had a Celebrate Teaching Learning event university-wide where 3 of our professors were recognized. Professor Barbara Billingsley was one of the recipients of the Rutherford Award for Excellence in Teaching. That's undergraduate university-wide. Professor Joanna Harrington was recognized for having received a Fulbright Award at the University of Texas at Austin last year. And Professor Peter Sankoff, who's off in Germany, although connected by Twitter and otherwise to events going on in Edmonton. Peter was recognized with the Brightspace Innovation Award in Teaching and Learning from the Society for Teaching and Learning in Higher Education, which is a North America-wide organization. And so wonderful, wonderful celebrations for faculty right to start the year. And one of the things that we're doing as well, much more actively, is promoting where we can our students, our faculty, our staff, for recognition, because quite frankly, in my view, this is a place that has actually not had enough of a spotlight shone on it. People are doing wonderful things here. Students are achieving tremendous, tremendous goals and opportunities and service. And so as best we can, please know that we are here to support you, working very closely with Professor Chris Spryzak, who is just a wonderful resource for helping us actually pull nomination packages together for faculty, for staff, working with us on student packages as well. We know that there are a number of opportunities coming up for students where reference letters are going to be required. Please make sure that you have your packages together early. As best we can, we want to be able to support you for clerkships, for internships, for other opportunities. We're here to help and support. You are achieving so much, and we want to make sure that it gets recognized. And so that's part of our mandate, and we'll continue to post those success stories as we come forward. couple of things that I want to talk about in terms of activities that are important for the faculty and for the university indeed going forward, and then I'll turn to a couple of specific issues of concern. You'll note that I'd sent out an invitation to a strategic plan open forum on Saturday. This faculty doesn't actually have a strategic plan. Kind of back of the envelope stuff and a lot of conversation for those of you who are in 3L back to September 2014 really allowed us to articulate some of what we needed to do immediately in hiring new faculty, providing frontline student supports. But now within the context of the broader university's institutional strategic plan, it's time for us to actually set out what is our mission, what is our vision, and where do we want to be going forward. What's important in terms of where we've already been, but what can we do better? So in preparation last year, and many of you were involved, we actually did a lot of background work. There was a special advisory committee that I struck, led by Professor Wood, on experiential learning, that I asked them to find best practices, find out what we could do to make a more robust experiential learning opportunity work for the circumstances that we've got here at the faculty. I invited Professor Linda Reif and a group to work on internationalization. Outbound, inbound faculty, students. We have a bunch of exchanges going on, some that are more successful than others. We need to build on that sort of experience and say in a focused way, who is it that we want to be, where do we want to be involved, and where can we actually maximize the experience for students who are wanting to take advantage of the existing relationships that we have with other universities internationally, but how can we do it with a particular focus? Third area, the student experience. One of the things that we did as well, 26 one-on-one interviews, 2 sets of online focus groups with students last spring. I was lurking in the chat room, if you will, and it was interesting to sort of see the dialogue and the discussion back and forth about key issues for the faculty. Everything that I call in the student life cycle, from how you were recruited to how you landed here, about how you were accommodated, to what happens after graduation. And all through that were really constructive comments about the manner in which we can be doing better and more, and also what you liked. What really matters about this community, and how do you think of it now that you're here, as opposed to what you thought of it coming before? How do we communicate what it is we're doing? Where do we need to do better in order to be able to prepare you and support you as you move through your law school experience and into what is a different and challenged economic environment? So we did a lot of background work, and a lot of background work has gone into preparing for what we're rolling out as a strategic planning process this year. Ideally, the goal is to come forward with a plan that will go to Law Faculty Council for approval. So the student reps on LFC will have an important part to play in approving that. We're also, though, working with John Webster and Alison Numero. If people don't know them, why don't you wave? From LFC and LSA, to have a separate parallel student consultation that will feed into this larger process on key issues. And so this Saturday's open forum goes from 9 until noon. There's lots of food. It'll happen up in CN Alumni Hall. Attend if you're able, but there will be lots of other opportunities for consultation and input on things of importance that matter. So we've got 5 different working groups: internationalization, experiential learning, student life cycle, alumni and community engagement, and curriculum, where they're all going to come under a specific microscope. But those aren't the only topics that the strategic plan is going to address. The steering committee as well, and I asked them to consider, put together a steering committee of, well, John and Allison are on it as student representatives. We've got 3 faculty members on it. An individual from the community who's a Crown prosecutor, has been a sessional instructor, an alum who has been an in-house counsel and actually former president of the Canadian Bar Association for Alberta, and then a large firm lawyer who's also an alum from downtown Edmonton, who was law's rep on Alumni Council for the university, as a bit of a brain trust to help guide the process. This is not my plan. This is the faculty's plan, and it has to be owned by the community because it's going to guide what goes on here well after I'm out of the chair. And so in that respect, at least, I encourage you to get involved in thinking about these issues. One question that has been raised with me already in light of the working groups is, what about Aboriginal and Indigenous? And so there was a robust discussion as to whether or not it should have its own, what I call I'm calling these buckets, not because they're necessarily containing everything, because things will spill over one into the other. And the response back was that Aboriginal and Indigenous flows into all of the areas. And so rather than having a concentrated, simple focus on that area or seeing it in isolation, it should actually inform the discussion that's going on in all of the other groups. And so please know that that's a deliberate choice. We'll see how it bears out, and there will be, both because of the efforts that we're undertaking and also because of the university's institutional strategic plan, a specific faculty response on those issues. This just allows us to organize some of the discussion in areas where you don't see in there, for example, faculty renewal. I will have separate discussion with faculty about that, but the entirety of the plan, which I'm hoping will be coming forward in draft in the early part of the new year, before the second town hall, will be something that we will test drive in front of everybody, allow for online and other input, and then work with your recommendations to try and make the best sort of plan that we can going forward. I caution as well that some of what you'll end up seeing, those of you who have lived through strategic planning processes, the eyes glaze over, organizations that you've been part of before. There's a real challenge. Everybody wants to get very granular. I'm trying to get us up to 20,000 feet to say, okay, look, there are things that we're going to need to implement. We'll work on implementation, but let's talk about the big ideas. Where do we need to be? Who are we as a faculty? What kind of vision do we want to own, be responsible for, or what needs to change? We've not had a kind of structured dialogue about that to the point, either before I was here or now, other than in the kind of crisis point of the tuition increase discussion. And so here's an opportunity when things are a little more calm, within the broader context of a university institutional strategic plan, to say, okay, where is it that we are and where do we want to be? You'll probably have received a message from the university president about the launch of the institutional strategic plan. I encourage you to read it. All the materials are available online. They're moving from concept to implementation. They're looking at a number of things to try and actually bolster and support what the university is doing as a whole. One of the areas that's coming under discussion for the deans and others is what they're labeling signature areas for the university. In part, that's a discussion on what does the university want to do, but also what does the university not want to do or not want to take on. What should be the U of A's broad identity, and where do we fit within that? So there's going to be continuing dialogue and iteration back and forth. It's not a kind of unidirectional approach. I encourage you to take part in those discussions and give the university your feedback, as well as being part of our process as the year ends up unfolding. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as things go forward. John and Allison have been terrific in terms of their contributions and perspectives so far in the steering committee discussions and otherwise. They'll talk to you separately about the student consultation process, but everything's front line in terms of where things are and where the group is coming together. And as I said, this isn't my plan. I'm sort of spearheading things because I know it needs to be done. But in terms of the steering committee and the plan itself, it needs to actually emerge from who we are as a community, as a faculty. Students, staff, faculty, and alumni are all key players in that, as well as our external stakeholders. So that'll be a process that's rolling out as the year ends up going ahead. So that's the university's institutional strategic plan and our strategic plan here. Couple of specific issues that I want to finalize my remarks with, and then we'll turn it to Q&A. Some of these emerge from dialogue that I'd had with the LSA executive directly. I try to meet with the president at least once a month, and then the LSA executive at least once a term, ideally more and more often as we need. There were two issues that were of particular concern, and one I want to address directly is the whole question of what's going on in the economy and career services and articling or other positions, because I know from my own background and experience how much of a worry and a concern that is. Many of you know I'm a 1992 grad out of Toronto when the economy was in the tank. People were getting articling positions, but higher backs were 3 out of 12, 2 out of 18, 4 out of 9. It was a tough time, and so I lived through that as a student. When I was in California 2008, 2009, you may have heard that the economy crashed. I moved here in 2014 just as the economy was crashing, so you might want to find out where I'm moving next and run the opposite direction. But it means I've got the familiarity with some of these issues. And one of the things that was important for me, even in advance of a plan, was actually, I like to say, doubling our career services capacity, making sure that we have more robust resources available for you. And this is not the end of the story on career services. We need more. I'm trying to find the finances in order to be able to do that, to bolster not only the training sessions, the counseling sessions that they're providing, but also the alumni have been much more directly engaged in other opportunities, and we're reaching out to them in ways that hasn't necessarily happened in a structured way before to say, will you take a student? Many of them do already, and that's great. But now with the opportunity for composite articles, some of the alumni who wouldn't necessarily be able to take on a student for the entirety of their article will happily split, 2 or 3 ways, the supervision of a student so you can punch your ticket. Very pleased to report, and I was really worried, as we all were, when the numbers were sitting at about 70% consistently, that we are over 90% of last year's class have articling positions. That's absolutely tremendous. It had been virtually guaranteed employment, 95 to 98% during the boom times. We're still over 90% and climbing, and we keep placing some of those students. So for those of you who are looking, please know that the resources are there. I am speaking to firms right now constantly in Calgary, Vancouver, Toronto, and here in Edmonton, large, medium, and small, government, other agencies, other places to say, look, I know in terms of fundraising right now there's not a lot of that there, but our students remain excellent and they need the opportunities that you can provide. So, some of the firms have, where they hired 7 students previously, they're hiring 4. I would like to make sure that all 4 are U of A students. I can't necessarily guarantee that, but please know that we're out there, that the career services staff are out there. James was here earlier on. You and your committee did a terrific, terrific career day, and I think it's those sorts of opportunities that you need to take advantage of as you chart your own path going forward. We will help you as best we can, but you may need to get a little more creative in your search. Consider options and opportunities that might not have been your first choice, or geography that wouldn't necessarily be your first direction, but you may understand that, hey, this is of necessity right now, and can build and lead to something different, perhaps something that you'd never even considered. So keep an open mind. We're here to help and support you through the process. Please know that it's something that I'm focusing on very directly. Last thing I want to mention, parties. People have asked me about it, and so I'm really happy to talk about it. And again, it's a case where for those of you who are new to the faculty, you won't necessarily know some of the history. 2 years ago, 2014-15, there were a number of serious problems with some events that really went sideways. And some of you know the history about that. All of them had one thing in common: they involved alcohol. And there was a perception problem that actually went well outside these faculty's walls about the ability of the students and student organizations to manage. So we had to take that into account. I'll give you a couple of illustrations. People talk about the ski trip. That was something a little unique and different. One of the ones that bothered me most, well, there are 2, was one after an LSA event. The event itself had gone really well. A number of people ended up occupying a classroom, dancing on the tables, lying to UAPS when they were asked for their identities, and threatening cleaners afterwards. That's just not on. And if you weren't law students and you were talking to police officers like that, that could be your license. There was another incident with, again, after an event, there was an individual found behind the wheel of a car in the parking lot where it was -40 outside, essentially passed out. That's wrong on so many levels. So we had a robust dialogue, and the LSA executive at that time imposed a self-ban on events involving alcohol, and then we talked about last year how things could be improved. We've had a continuing dialogue with the LSA and with other groups about having events involving alcohol, and one of the things as well is understanding that the mental health and wellness focus that actually goes on is sometimes seen as inconsistent with events involving alcohol. Profession has a problem, and we want to make sure that it doesn't start here, but at the same time, responsible use is actually entirely appropriate and something that, you're all adults, should end up going on. So the dialogue that I've had and that the Vice Dean has had with student groups and organizations is, how can we be prepared? We invited last year's group, LSA and others, to get the training that the university provides, to put together essentially what I'd call a risk management manual. We've got a checklist of things so that people can be guided event to event for what needs to be done and taken care of. That's just responsible management, and frankly, in a couple of years, those of you who are doing anything like this, you're probably going to be drafting them for your clients. So here's a good place to start. In that respect, at least, the LSA executive has brought forward at least one proposal. I know of another one coming in the works to go to the Vice Dean to go through the process, and that we've approved. So it's a soft launch. We're not going, whoo, the booze is back. But to know that responsibly within the faculty, there's no sort of outright ban, there's no complete moratorium on it. It will be event by event. We're wanting to make sure that the protections are in place, both for our benefit, but more importantly for yours. And so in that respect, at least, really glad to work with Nick and the team, and it will be something that we review as the year ends up going forward. I think, again, it's a case where you've made the case. One of the things about one of the events last year that people said was that going outside really took people away from the faculty, and it was nice to do things within community. And so in that respect, at least, yeah, I agree. I think we're there. We're not visiting the sins of past people on you. It's just instructive for how we prepare for events going forward. And so in that respect, at least we look forward to working with you and to recreating some of that community in a different way where it's not the focus. It shouldn't be the focus of the parties and events, but as part of what goes on here at the faculty, responsible use is actually something that, again, we'll work with you on as we end up moving forward. So wanted to address that. That really concludes it in terms of my comments and remarks. John and Allison, I don't know whether you want to say anything at this point about the student consultation. All right, that will come at a later point, but please know that they're very directly involved in both Saturday's event and the consultation going forward. I understand that there are 10 students who are coming on Saturday assigned to the different groups. We've also got additional students who will be working with the organizers as what I'll call scribes or reporters to help us actually write the reports. So there's lots of opportunity for involvement and input either directly or indirectly on that front. Okay, I'll throw it open to questions. There are microphones that we can either probably circulate or have you go to, but I'm also happy if you want to ask a question from your seat, I'll just repeat it so that we capture it for purposes of the video. So, over to you. I know that some of the town halls previously was me or others kind of unloading for an hour. That's not happening today. Amazingly enough, there is time for Q&A. David.
Yes, can you give us any kind of update on the Federation of Law Societies' attempt to replace CPLED with 2 7-hour bar exams?
So, good question. I'm actually meeting with the Law Society of Alberta benchers tomorrow. The Federation of Law Societies is meeting later on in October. There is a big discussion going on about what should happen with articling and with what I call broadly transition to practice. I've had very direct discussions with representatives of the Law Society of BC and Alberta most directly. I've also had previous conversations at a staff level with the Law Society of Upper Canada. So, there are others, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. I've not talked to their people directly, but we can. But those 3 law societies are the ones where our students are most directly heading. Lots of concern about CPLED. Pilot programs to sort of replace CPLED with sort of in-class third-year opportunities. That was being piloted at both the University of Manitoba and Calgary. I said no here because they weren't providing additional resources for us to do it. I've been very concerned about them offloading onto third year, and as part of the third year program, effectively the sort of transition to practice issues. You may have been reading that the Law Society of Upper Canada has recommended the cancellation of the LPP program. They've got a huge issue with unplaced articling students in Ontario. One of the things that, again, I continue to emphasize and that has very much resonated through Alberta is that what's happening in Ontario is not happening everywhere, and we should not all be bound by an Ontario solution. The other thing that's been interesting as well is that you may have heard about the Lakehead Law School, which essentially structured itself to have students complete or fulfill their articling requirements as part of their program. There was some suggestion that we'd all have to move to that level. What's been interesting out of the first class or first group of graduates from Lakehead is that firms are actually requiring most of their grads to article, to actually go through articles again because they don't necessarily know where that's going. So in terms of a direct response to your question, no news. I'm on top of it as best I can. There was a situation in Ontario that you may have heard about with a report coming out in April, for notional resolution at the beginning of May this past year that would have said for certain designated or accredited experiential learning requirements, you could truncate your articling year requirements. They never talked to the law deans about that. They never talked to the law firms about that. The treasurer of the Law Society of Upper Canada, Janet Miner, issued a letter very shortly after getting bombarded with everybody saying, what on earth is this? And we're nowhere near ready for it, to withdraw it for further study. So there's lots of dialogue going on right now about transition to practice. The word that I've had from the Law Society of Alberta and the Law Society of BC, status quo. So I'm not expecting any radical change in the near term. I will certainly let you know if I hear any different. Yes.
Do we have any numbers on how 3Ls, current 3Ls have done with securing articles?
Yes. Now, the question was, do we have current numbers on how 3Ls have done in terms of securing articles? It's still early. Part of it is in terms of the cycle of hiring is that the large firms tend to hire now, and then, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Mandy, what's happened in the last couple of years is that smaller firms or sole practitioners tend to hire when they're setting budgets for next year. There's a bit of a wave in January, and then this year a wave as late as May, June. So the numbers so far were positive. They were better than I expected. I want to say of those reporting back in, because we just do an unofficial survey, I think it was somewhere in the range of 60% of those who were looking for articling positions had already landed them. That's frankly a better start than last year. So I'm optimistic in terms of where that will continue, but the resources are here and available. A lot of firms, particularly the smaller and medium-sized ones, have not set their budgets yet because they're really not sure where the economy's going. Edmonton's healthier than Calgary. Calgary is in a very, very difficult set of circumstances. A lot of the financings have stopped, although I've heard, and again, talking to some of the people at Career Day, that things are starting to turn around. So it's not as good as where I would like it to be, but it's also not as, frankly, and again, Mandy's nodding, so I think I'm right on this. We're not actually, we're in a better place than we were last year, so that bodes well. And again, it really depends. We'll see as the year progresses. Again, I encourage those of you who have not yet landed an article, don't give up, keep at it. We've managed to come up with creative solutions, and I very directly appealed in some cases to alumni to say, you've not done this before, now's the time. So we'll continue working on that. I'll also be reporting on this to the Law Society of Alberta tomorrow morning, afternoon at their venture meeting in Calgary, and talking to them about what some of the circumstances are to make sure that they're aware of the changing circumstances. They are largely, but not in the granular way. And I want to make sure that they know that we're concerned, because the other thing that I've been hearing is that a number of lawyers and law firms are saying, you know, paralegals can do a lot now, I'm not going to take on an articling student. Or I'm not going to take on an articling student because I can wait until they're trained somewhere else for 3 years and then hire them in laterally. That's a real shift, and I think in terms of the Law Society saying to the profession, it's part of your professional obligation to take on articling students. That message needs to be reinforced. We can only say so much. It's got to come from the CBA, from the Law Society, and from everywhere else. And so as long as they're going to continue that process and not, you know, make it part of your 3rd year, then we'll continue getting that message across. Other questions? You want more pizza? There is some outside, I think, still. Yes, sir.
With regard to the transition of practice, has the faculty taken a position advocating for one particular system or another in terms of changes or perhaps for the status quo?
Not an official position. We've been working with the status quo because that's the signal that we're getting from the Law Society of Alberta and BC. That being said, one of the things that I asked, and that the students actually asked back in 2014 for us to look at, was more robust experiential learning opportunities. I'd come from a place in California that actually of about 1,100 students, 300 to 400 at any time were actually involved in either some sort of clinic, externship placement, or supervised arrangement. That took a real investment of infrastructure and resources. And so we're working on doing that. Part of my thinking, back of mind, and we'll see again what comes out of the strategic planning process. As I said, there's a particular bucket that's identified as experiential learning. Professor Wood, who's an expert on this, actually when he was visiting at Saskatchewan, did experiential learning opportunities for business law subjects, said what's the best practice? And so that in creating or building on our experiential learning opportunities that we have already, should it come the time that we have to transition, then we'll be better prepared. I think the focus, though, in the dialogue so far, if I can comment on this, and we'll see again where the dialogue goes, is that people have suggested that one of our real strengths is as one of Western Canada's leading academically focused legal faculties. That in terms of job opportunities otherwise, that we're best focusing on what we do really well, which is give you the ability to think, criticize, analyze, research, and really have that academic focus with things, you know, with experiential learning opportunities either through SLS or otherwise, built in and bolted on, if you would, or integrated as part of that experience. That's served us really well so far. I want to make sure that we have a very robust dialogue about what that should be. At the same time, I'm very conscious of the fact that we may not have control of it. The law societies may, or the Federation may tell us articling is done and that we have to be prepared to respond. I don't think that will happen without a really robust discussion with the law schools. I'm in constant contact with the other law deans about it. There are some places that would like to head in that direction. There are others of us who are certainly on the approach so far that we cannot do that transition and do the whole thing without a significant investment of resources. And that would be a big shift for us. So right now, if I had to predict, and this is just me, no significant change, but there will be a lot more opportunities. Students have said to us, and I think rightly so, we want more experiential learning opportunities. I want to figure out how best we deliver those, but not make the sort of radical change that, say, a Lakehead has done. I think the jury's still out on that experiment, and we'll see where that ends up going. Other questions? Lots of other exciting stuff happening this year. I have announced to the faculty that we hired 3 full-time faculty members, tenure stream for this year. One deferred his start, so Professor Lavoie will be starting next year. We hired 2 visiting assistant professors. I was able to get 2-year contract funding for 2 visiting assistant professors to allow us to serve as a bit of an incubator. I will be, and we're dealing with some issues right now that are challenges at Central, but we're soon to be posting ads for up to 5 new faculty members to be hired this year to start next year. 3 tenure stream faculty, sort of open area, although we're specifically identifying business as a priority area. So we're inviting people to apply in that area, not to the exclusion of others, but we'd like to see candidates in that area. 2 dedicated positions though. One which I'm calling Aboriginal Indigenous subject matter. Another one where the provost has specified and provided some funding for us directly for an individual of Aboriginal Indigenous, what I call identity, and that's per the university's definition of that. That's field open as well. So up to 5 new tenure stream faculty members. This is transformational for the faculty. We had gone from 36.5 full-time equivalent faculty members in 2009 to, depending if you had counted me in there, 26, so nearly 10 plus down by 2014. My goal in 3 years is to have us back at where we were in 2009, which to my mind still isn't enough for, frankly, who we are and what we want to be. So it's a very exciting process for us. It's a real challenge though right now. A lot of Canadian law faculties are hiring. There's very good talent out there. I want to make sure that they land here. The students, the faculty, the staff, the sense of community, frankly, is our best advertising in that respect. And this is a place where our faculty members can grow and thrive. I think we've done wonderfully well in terms of the hiring so far. Professor Lund should be beaming in the back of the room. As one of those that we brought on board this year, we look forward to actually continuing to build. And I'll tell you as well, and this was something that I mentioned last night at the Teaching Awards, we're hiring excellent scholars. But one of the things that's mattered to me in particular, but also to the members of the faculty members and the student representative on the advisory selection committee, and it's a closed process here, that's something that's been a tradition, is how are these new potential faculty members committed to teaching and to service to the community? Those things really matter to us, as well as having excellent researchers, and so that remains a priority. And it means that some of the excellent candidates that are coming forward aren't right for us. They might be right for somewhere, but they're not right for this faculty, because that kind of commitment to teaching excellence, I referred to some of the awards that people were getting, that remains a constant. People who are committed to our community, committed to you, the students, committed to and have a passion for the teaching. And so that remains a big priority for us, and it's an exciting time in that regard. So we look forward to hopefully making some announcements sooner rather than later. There'll be a process that goes on through the year. Any other questions? As I said, I'll be available afterwards if anybody wants to come. I'll hang out here if you want. If you've got any questions one-on-one, feel free as well to route anything through the LSA executive. I think there's still pizza outside. No, gone. Sorry. Okay, we tried. So we'll know to order more for next time. We'll hope to see some of you on Saturday at the Open Forum. Breakfast at 8:30. Session starts at 9. CN Alumni Hall. If you want to drop in for part or all of it, we'd like to have you there. And as I said, more student consultation as the fall proceeds. Thank you all very much for coming. Have a great rest of the semester.